That fateful pre-dawn morning, with my own eyes, I watched my mother-in-law silently crush abortion pills and mix them into my custom-blended superfood smoothie. 3 days later, I calmly swapped the poison bowl and let my sister-in-law drink it. The result: doctors declared my sister-in-law's uterus had to be permanently removed. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, driven mad by the truth, died after throwing herself under a tractor trailer. How could a wife, who had always been so accommodating and patient like me, transform into someone so ruthless, pushing their entire family into such a bloody hell? In a sprawling villa in Greenwich, Connecticut, at the tail end of a damp, chilly autumn, the air turned cold with startling speed. A piercing wind snuck through the gaps in the large glass windows, carrying a suffocating dampness. That night, I was 5 months pregnant. My belly had recently grown larger and felt much heavier. The sensation of fetal movement, the small kicks from the innocent life inside me, was my only solace in this cold house. Around 2 in the morning, the urge to urinate and a dry throat woke me. I moved slowly. Next to me, Julian, my husband, was still snoring rhythmically. He had his back to me, pulling his thick comforter tight, ignoring his wife who struggled to catch her breath due to the weight of her belly. With great effort, I propped myself up, slipped on my plush slippers, and quietly opened the bedroom door, stepping into the hallway. The luxurious villa was submerged in a silent darkness. Only the faint yellow light from the wall-mounted nightlights offered any guidance. I held onto the wooden banister, intending to go down to the kitchen for a glass of warm water. However, just as I descended the stairs to the first-floor landing, my steps suddenly froze. Through the slightly ajar kitchen door, a dim sliver of light escaped. At this hour, the entire house should have been fast asleep. The housekeeper had also taken a few days off to visit her family. So who was in the kitchen? A terrible premonition flashed through my mind. A chill ran down my spine as if someone had dripped ice water along it. I held my breath, tiptoeing as lightly as possible, pressing my body against the cold wall next to the kitchen door. Through the narrow gap, I saw my mother-in-law, Eleanor. She stood with her back to the door, wearing a maroon silk dressing gown. Under the yellowish light of the range hood, she was hunched over, busy with something on the marble countertop. The faint whirring of a small personal blender was barely audible, but in the dead of night, the sound was terrifyingly clear. She was crushing something. "Hurry up, it'll be morning soon," Eleanor muttered in frustration. "Damn it, the coating on these pills is so tough. This little blender is so loud." Just then, the sound of slippers shuffling came from the back stairs. Chloe, my 5-year-old sister-in-law, entered the kitchen. She yawned widely while scratching her messy hair, wearing pajamas. "Mom, what the hell are you doing making so much noise? The roosters aren't even crowing yet. You're already up, disturbing everyone's sleep." "Shh, keep your voice down, you brat. Do you want to wake up that damned seed carrier upstairs? Here, hold the mortar, quick." "Oh, please. You're worrying for nothing, Mom. Julian's been coming home blackout drunk every night lately, and your precious sister-in-law sleeps like the dead when she's pregnant. There's no way she'd know. Anyway, what are you grinding? What kind of pill is that bright red?" I held my breath. My hands reflexively clamped over my own mouth to stifle the horrified sob that almost escaped. My heart pounded so violently in my chest I was afraid they would hear it. Through the crack in the door, I watched Chloe lean in, pick up an empty pill packet, and toss it onto the counter. "It's an abortion pill. I had to call in a favor with a distant acquaintance to get this red powder. It's colorless, odorless, and just a pinch is enough to turn the fetus in her belly into a pool of blood. Today, I'm going to mix it into her collagen smoothie with organic berries. No one will ever know." "Geez, Mom, you're playing dirty. What if she eats it and dies? If the police get involved, the whole family could go to jail." "Die? What are you talking about? This type only induces a miscarriage. At worst, she'll have severe bleeding. We'll just call an ambulance and take her to the hospital. Later, if the doctor asks, I'll just say she ate something she wasn't supposed to during pregnancy or that her body is just weak. Who would know I put the pills in? Don't worry. I've asked for all the details. This dose is divided over 3 days. A little bit each day. I guarantee the fetus will die inside her, and she'll be rolling on the floor in pain. Then we'll take her to the hospital for a D&C. But that's Julian's child too, Mom. Aren't you being too cruel? What if Julian finds out? Cruel? Our family's reputation can't be tarnished by her low-class background. That shameless gold digger from some backwater town, using a baby to trap my son. In her dreams, Julian is about to be promoted to CEO. Isabella, the daughter of the chairman of the Sterling Vance Group, is crazy about your brother. If Alara miscarries, I'll have a reason to force Julian to divorce her, claiming she's an unfit mother, giving him grounds for a clean divorce. We'll kick her out of this house without a penny. Then Julian can marry the chairman's daughter, and our family's status will skyrocket. Do you understand? Wow, your plan is solid. Honestly, I'm so sick of seeing Alara's holier-than-thou Lady of the Manor act. Just kick her out. But remember, Mom, get that Mercedes back from her. I've had my eye on that car for a long time. All right, hurry up and finish. I'm dead tired. When you're done, get me a small bowl of the collagen elixir, okay? My skin's been looking dull. I need a boost. But don't mix up my bowl with the one with the drugs in it, you hear? Yes, Your Highness. I'll put your bowl on the left side of the tray. The bitch's bowl will be on the right, the one with the blue rim. Remember that. Now go back to bed. I'll clean up. Let me handle everything. You just get ready to be a true lady of leisure soon. Their disgusting conversation pierced my eardrums with horrifying clarity. My entire body was rigid, like a stone statue. My stomach twisted. An overwhelming wave of nausea rose in my throat. But I had to clench my teeth, biting my lower lip to keep from making a sound. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. They were talking about murdering my child, killing the flesh and blood that was growing day by day inside my body. They were no longer human. They were demons. Using the family name, using the excuse of equal social status to mask their cruel intentions and bottomless greed. My sacrifices, my patience, and all my efforts to be part of this family were to be repaid with a cup of poison mixed into an expensive collagen elixir. I lowered my hands to clutch my round belly tightly. My baby, as if sensing its mother's panic, kicked hard against my uterine wall. That kick was like an electric current that jolted away all the weakness, despair, and tears welling in the corners of my eyes. No, I would not cry. I would not allow myself to cry for these immoral bastards. The fear vanished completely, replaced by a blazing rage. My blood boiled to the crown of my head, spreading to my fingertips. If they wanted to take my child's life, if they wanted to cast me out onto the streets empty-handed, then I would show them the price of cruelty. I would turn this family to ash, make them kneel at my feet, and feel a suffering 10,000 times greater than what they intended for me and my child. I slowly backed away, each step as light as a ghost. I returned upstairs, back to the bedroom. Julian was still snoring. I looked at the face of the man I once loved, the man who had sworn to protect me for life. Now he lay there, a pawn in his own mother's vicious plan. Or perhaps he was an accomplice, a bastard I had failed to recognize all this time. I went into the bathroom, turned the cold water tap on full blast, and scooped water to slap hard against my face. The bone-chilling air helped me keep my head as cool as possible. In the mirror, a woman with disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes stared back at me. That was no longer Alara, the patient and submissive daughter-in-law. That was a mother prepared to do anything to protect her child. The game had just begun. The next morning, at 10 o'clock sharp, I descended to the ground floor with a deliberately exhausted expression. My hand rested on my lower back, as usual. The atmosphere in the dining room was calm, filled with the fragrant aroma of breakfast. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, dressed in an elegant floral silk blouse. Her hair was styled in a neat bun. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with a bright smile. A fake smile that, had I seen it yesterday, would have felt warm, but today made my stomach churn with nausea. "Oh, Alara, you're awake, dear. Come sit. Did you sleep well last night? I've noticed you complaining about back pain lately. I feel so bad for you. I woke up extra early this morning. I specifically made you a collagen smoothie with organic berries. Eat up, it's good for your circulation. Don't worry. Pregnant women get tired easily. You need to eat plenty of nutritious food." As she spoke, she stood up, took a steaming glass of the smoothie from a tray, and carefully placed it right in front of me. I glanced down. Just as she had said last night, on the front edge of the ceramic bowl was a light blue line. Inside, translucent strands of the premium supplement floated with plump red goji berries. On the outside, it was a high-class nutritional soup, but inside, it held death for my child. I pulled out a chair and sat down. The corner of my lip lifted slightly, forming a submissive smile. "Thank you, Mom. You've gone to so much trouble. We have a housekeeper, but you still did it yourself. I feel bad. How can a housekeeper be as meticulous as me, my first grandchild? Of course, I have to take care of you myself. Come on, eat it before it gets cold. It'll taste off if it cools down." Just then, Chloe came down from upstairs. She pulled out a chair, her eyes glued to her phone screen, mumbling sarcastic pleasantries. It must be nice being the sister-in-law. Spoiled by mom like a golden egg. Eat up, sis, eat a lot so my nephew is healthy. The word healthy was deliberately emphasized with a mocking, malicious tone. I picked up the ceramic spoon and slowly stirred the elixir. A light, fragrant aroma wafted up, but in my head, I pictured the red powder from last night. I scooped a little and brought it to my mouth. The 4 eyes of Eleanor and Chloe stared at me sharply, radiating attention and anticipation they couldn't hide. They were waiting for me to swallow this poison, but I wouldn't be defeated so easily. I lowered the spoon, clutched my stomach, and frowned, feigning pain. Ouch! My stomach suddenly feels so acidic. Mom, maybe I slept in the wrong position last night, so my acid reflux is acting up. Now, smelling the elixir is making me nauseous. I don't think I can eat right now. Let me take it to my room, okay, Mom? I'll eat it after I rest for a bit. Hey, you have to eat it later. The elixir needs to be eaten hot for all the benefits to be absorbed. Dear, just close your eyes and swallow a few spoonfuls. I can't, Mom. I'm really nauseous. I covered my mouth, pretending to retch loudly. Then I quickly picked up the bowl, stood up, and turned, heading straight upstairs without giving her a chance to force me further. I walked very fast, but I could still feel the sharp, hateful glare of my mother-in-law on my back. Once in my room, I immediately locked the door. I placed the bowl on the vanity. My hands began to shake violently from suppressed emotion. I quickly opened a drawer and took out a small glass vial, a former cosmetic sample bottle. Carefully, I spooned a portion of the elixir that had reddish sediment at the bottom of the bowl, poured it into the vial, sealed it tightly, and hid it deep inside my handbag. The rest of the elixir, I took directly to the bathroom, dumped it cleanly into the toilet, and flushed. Watching the swirling water carry it all away, my eyes were cold and tearless. The evidence was secured. Tomorrow, I would take this to a lab myself to be tested, to see what poison they were really using. My plan had begun. For those who dared to try and kill my child, I would make sure they paid the highest, most painful price, so they could never rise again. The coldness of this villa didn't come from the marble walls or the expensive crystal chandeliers, but from the hearts of its inhabitants. Lying restlessly on the large bed, hugging the small creature moving inside me, memories of my time as a daughter-in-law in this family came back as clear and sharp as shards of glass. I used to think love could overcome all differences in background, but reality slapped me hard in the face. My husband's family, Julian's family, always prided themselves on their facade of being an educated and wealthy family. My father-in-law died young, leaving a building materials business and several valuable plots of land to Eleanor. She used that wealth to build her image as a matriarch, always appearing in silk and jewelry. Her mouth constantly echoed philosophies about pedigree, about the dignity of the wealthy. Meanwhile, I was just a girl who grew up in a poor, rural town in Ohio. My parents were just farmers who worked themselves to the bone, their backs burned by the sun, to send me to school and see me succeed. The day Julian brought me to be introduced, Eleanor's first look at me was not the usual scrutinizing gaze of a potential mother-in-law, but a condescending, top-to-bottom stare that stripped away all my self-esteem. At that first dinner, she indirectly insinuated that this house only welcomed people who could bring business advantages, not a social shelter for those looking to climb the social ladder. If it weren't for the fact that I was a PR manager at a large corporation with a salary that even Julian envied, and most importantly, because Julian insisted on marrying me to the point of threatening to leave home, the doors of this family would never have opened for me. However, life is not a fairy tale. After getting married, I realized that Julian was not a prince who would bravely stand up to protect his wife. He was, in fact, just a coward, a puppet controlled by his domineering mother. All the salary I earned, Eleanor always found a way for Julian to manage it. The things I bought for my own parents back home were sneered at by her as stealing the husband's family fortune for poor farmers. Even the Mercedes-Benz I bought with my own savings before marriage was casually used by Chloe for her outings and parties with friends, without even a word of permission from me. Chloe was a perfect copy of Eleanor, but a lazier and more entitled version. At 25, with no steady job, her life consisted of dressing up in designer goods bought with her brother's credit card, while her mouth always belittled hardworking people. Chloe hated me. She hated my financial independence. Hated that I wouldn't bow down and kiss up to her and her mother. Hundreds of times I caught Chloe sneering when I wore a simple dress. Thousands of times she deliberately spilled my expensive perfume and then casually said, "It's just cheap stuff you can buy again." But I was patient. I endured for the sake of the word family, thinking that if I was good, even a rock would eventually erode. However, all my patience was in vain. Ever since Julian was promoted to vice president thanks to a major partnership with the real estate giant, the Sterling Vance Group. The chairman of the Sterling Vance Group had a beloved daughter named Isabella who had just returned from abroad. Ironically, this young lady from a wealthy family fell for Julian at first sight at a business dinner. Isabella was young, rich, with a giant inheritance and the power that any ambitious man would covet. Julian began to change, coming home late at night with the pungent scent of a strange woman's perfume on his clothes. Secretive phone calls on the balcony and baseless arguments with me became more frequent. Of course, Eleanor did not miss this golden opportunity. In her eyes, Isabella was not a homewrecker, but a golden ladder for her family to truly step into the world of the upper class. She began to openly invite Isabella for dinner at our home, deliberately letting me witness them laughing and talking like a real family. She used the excuse that I had been married for 3 years without a child to tormenting me, making snide remarks about my biological clock or asking if Julian and I were having trouble. Every dinner turned into a session of mental torture, where I was dragged out as a shield for the cruelest insults. And then the miracle that seemed to save my life happened. I was pregnant. Holding the test stick with 2 bright red lines, I cried like a child. I naively thought that this child would be the bond that would protect me from my husband's family's cruelty. However, the day I announced the happy news, Julian was stunned, while Eleanor's face turned pale as if she had just swallowed a fly. Instead of rejoicing at the arrival of her first grandchild, they sank into a terrifying silence. I didn't understand that silence until this morning. D? D. 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 Do. 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 To bring a billionaire daughter-in-law into the house, to have Julian legitimately sit in the CEO's chair, they had to remove this thorn. To kill an unborn life, to push a pregnant woman into painful bleeding. That was the method chosen by these people who called themselves the upper class. They had cornered me into a dead end. My kindness had been used as a doormat. They wanted me to lose my child, to leave with nothing but a broken, bleeding heart. But they forgot one thing. When a mother is cornered into protecting the life of the baby in her womb, that mother no longer knows the meaning of fear. My gentle days were over. From this moment on, I would become the darkest nightmare this family had ever faced. I would live, my child would live, and I would make them pay with their lives for every evil intention they had sown. That morning in Greenwich, a thick fog blanketed the area. The biting cold chilled me to the bone. I sat in an Uber, my hands clasped together, tightly clutching my handbag containing the small glass vial with the sample from the collagen elixir. My heart pounded. All the hustle and bustle of traffic outside seemed muffled by an invisible membrane. All that was left was the sound of my own ragged breath echoing in my chest. My destination was not the office, but a reputable, private biochemical lab hidden in a discreet part of nearby Stamford. I couldn't go to a major hospital because my medical records could be bribed or accessed by Julian's family. I needed results that were completely confidential. Entering the lab's waiting room, the pungent smell of medical alcohol hit my nose, making my stomach churn. I fought back the wave of morning sickness and handed the glass vial to the doctor on duty, requesting a toxicology screen for any foreign substances. My explanation was brief. I suspected someone had put something in my food. The doctor looked at me, a pregnant woman with a pale face. His eyes showed a hint of pity, but he didn't ask many questions. He just nodded and promised to expedite the testing process. The 4 hours I spent waiting in a coffee shop across the street were the longest of my life. I sat by the window, my eyes staring blankly at the passing traffic. In my head, the horrifying conversation between my mother-in-law and sister-in-law replayed on a loop. Their cruel words, their cold calculations, sliced my mind into bleeding wounds. If I hadn't woken up by chance, if I had naively finished that bowl of elixir as usual, right now I might be writhing in a pool of my own blood in an emergency room, crying hysterically over the loss of my child. While those demons celebrated, the ringing of my phone jolted me back to reality. It was the lab. I nearly ran out of the coffee shop, crossing the street without looking at the light. When I held the test results in my hand, even though I had prepared myself mentally, my legs trembled so much I could barely stand. I had to grip the edge of a counter to read the words printed in bold on the paper. The analysis showed that the sediment in the sample contained extremely high levels of mifepristone and misoprostol. These are the two main components of the harshest medical abortion drugs, combined with some traditional herbal roots known to restrict blood flow to the uterus. A lethal abortifacient cocktail. The doctor who handled my case explained it to me with a very serious expression. He said that for a woman 5 months pregnant, the fetus is already large. Using this drug would not only certainly kill the fetus, but also cause extremely violent uterine contractions, premature rupture of membranes, and unstoppable hemorrhaging. If not treated immediately, the uterus could rupture, posing a high risk to the mother's life. Or, in the best-case scenario, the uterus would have to be permanently removed, completely taking away the ability to ever be a mother again. Permanently removed. Those two words echoed in my brain like a death knell. Those animals didn't just want to kill my child, they wanted to sever my lineage. They wanted to destroy my entire life, my health, and my future in the most barbaric way possible. They wanted to turn me into a broken, useless creature, so Julian would have a legitimate reason to kick me to the curb without society blaming him. Their cruelty had surpassed that of wild beasts. I folded the lab report carefully, placed it in a waterproof plastic envelope, and shoved it deep into a password-protected compartment of my bag. This was my ironclad proof, the sword I would use to finish them when the time was right. But now was not the time. If I exposed everything now, they would deny it vehemently, even accuse me of buying the drugs myself to frame my husband's family. I had to use their own weapon against them, let them live in the illusion that their plan was proceeding smoothly. The following days were a nerve-wracking psychological war that left me breathless. Every morning, going downstairs to face the hypocritical face and bright, attentive smile of my mother-in-law, I had to summon all my willpower not to plunge a fruit knife into her chest. Eleanor still routinely prepared the smoothie every morning. The bowl with the light blue rim was always placed neatly in front of me. I began to play a perfect role. I pretended to be obedient and grateful for her care. Every time she brought me the bowl, I would smile, accept it, but always find an excuse not to eat it immediately in front of her. Sometimes I'd claim an upset stomach and needed to drink warm water first. Other times I'd claim an urgent call from the office that needed to be handled in my room. Of course, Eleanor was an old fox. She wasn't easily fooled. There were days when she'd use the excuse of cleaning my room to stand frozen in the doorway, her gaze like an eagle's on my hands. In those moments, I would calmly scoop the liquid and put it in my mouth, pretending to swallow but actually holding it in my cheek. Then, when she turned to wipe a table, I'd quickly spit it into a handkerchief I had hidden under my clothes. There were days I took the bowl to the bathroom, poured it directly into the toilet, and flushed. Afterwards, I'd bring the empty bowl to the kitchen, wash it clean, and never forget to leave a very sweet thank you. Mom's elixir was so delicious. I finished every last drop. My patience paid off as I noticed a change in my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's attitudes. Seeing me eat the elixir without any reaction for the first 2 days, they started to look anxious. I heard mumbled curses from the kitchen, suspicious glances from Chloe as she saw me still walking around the house, hale and hearty. I knew the dose they had administered wasn't enough to cause an immediate reaction. They were waiting for the 3rd day, the day the accumulated dosage would reach its peak, and I was also waiting for that day. The day I would turn the deadly poison they had so carefully prepared into a gift from the Grim Reaper that would repay their own evil. Everything was meticulously planned in my head. I would not only survive, but I would make them feel the sensation of their guts being torn apart and their blood flowing like a river, right inside this house. On the evening of the 3rd day, the atmosphere in the villa was suffocating. Outside, the rain fell in heavy sheets, its droplets drumming against the glass windows with a crackling sound. Dinner was unusually silent. Julian had called to say he was entertaining clients and wouldn't be home. It was just me, Eleanor, and Chloe sitting around the large dining table. I deliberately ate very little. My hand continuously stroked my belly gently. Occasionally, I would wince, showing a tired expression. The small symptoms I displayed did not escape Eleanor's eagle eyes. She glanced at Chloe, the corners of her lips lifting slightly into a triumphant smirk. "What's wrong, Alara? You don't look well. Your face is so pale today. If you eat so little, how will you have the strength to care for my grandchild?" "Yes, my stomach has been cramping since this afternoon, Mom. There's a heavy feeling in my lower abdomen. It's very uncomfortable. Maybe because the baby is growing so fast lately, it's pressing on a nerve." "Oh, is that so? Cramping is normal for pregnant women. Don't worry. Tonight, I've prepared a double portion of the smoothie for you, with lots of strengthening herbs. After dinner, I'll bring it directly to your room. Make sure you finish it so you'll feel strong. After you drink this dose, I guarantee all your pain will be over, once and for all. Her tone emphasized the words over, once and for all, with a heavy, veiled meaning. I lowered my head to hide the flash of a sharp, cold glint in my eyes. Tonight, she had decided to deliver the final blow, forcing me to drink the strongest dose to terminate my pregnancy. Just then, Chloe pushed her plate away, leaning back in her chair with a smug and satisfied look, scrolling through her phone. She casually stroked her flat stomach and spoke loudly to her mother, ignoring my presence as if I were air. "Mom, get ready to buy a nice dress. You'll be attending my wedding soon. I've caught a big one this time." "What are you talking about? What wedding? Who's going to marry you?" You underestimate me, Mom. Remember Mr. Thompson, the owner of that seafood restaurant chain?" "Well, I just took a test this morning. 2 clear lines. I'm over a month pregnant. He can't get away this time. I'm going to show up at his house with this belly and cause a scene. Force him to divorce that old wife of his and marry me. If not, I'll leak our bedroom photos online and ruin his business. At the very least, he'll have to give me a few luxury apartments as compensation. Either way, our lives are about to change drastically." "Oh my God. Seriously, dear? Oh, my clever girl. Pregnant with a tycoon's baby. Your future is bright, dear. A baby is the ultimate leverage. What man can escape that responsibility? If you give him a son, you'll secure a massive settlement. His entire fortune could be yours. So clever of you, dear. It wasn't a waste for me to give birth to you." Listening to the mother and daughter exchange praises made my nausea explode. It was utterly ridiculous and disgusting to witness this family's rotten moral standards. Her own daughter was pregnant out of wedlock with a married man, using the pregnancy to destroy someone else's happiness, to blackmail and force a marriage. Yet her mother laughed with pride, considering it a weapon and a sign of cleverness. Meanwhile, I, the legal daughter-in-law carrying her own son's flesh and blood, was being plotted against in the most heinous way, just to pave the way for her son to become a billionaire's son-in-law. This cruelty, this sick double standard, destroyed the last shred of compassion left in my mind. If they considered the life of a baby as a tool for profit, as a disposable item, then tonight I would let them taste the poison they had so painstakingly concocted. After dinner, I went up to my room to rest. Just 15 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Eleanor entered carrying a wooden tray. On the tray, as usual, was the collagen elixir in the bowl with the blue rim. But next to my bowl was a crystal glass containing a thick, pale pink liquid. It was the pink, cold-pressed juice that Chloe drank every night for her skin. "Alara, wake up and drink your elixir, dear. I've cooked it carefully. I also made Chloe's collagen drink. When she comes up to her room, I'll give it to her. Drink it quickly while it's warm. I'll wait here so I can take the bowl down to wash." She stood there, frozen beside the bed. Her gaze never left me. This time, she had no intention of giving me a chance to take the bowl away. She wanted to see with her own eyes as I swallowed this deadly liquid. The hand I had hidden under the blanket clenched into a tight fist. I slowly sat up, reaching out to accept the bowl. The steam carried a slightly strange aroma, very difficult to detect if one wasn't paying close attention. I brought the spoon to my mouth, pretending to blow on it slowly. But at that exact moment, I clutched my stomach, contorted my face, and screamed in terror. "Ah, Mom, my stomach hurts so much. Ah, my stomach is cramping, Mom. A cramp! My calf is cramping." I kicked the blanket off. Both my hands gripped my right calf, and I rolled on the bed, groaning. The bowl in my hand wobbled, and a few drops of the liquid spilled out. "Hey, be careful, the bowl will spill. Why are you suddenly cramping? Such a hassle." "Mom, please get the bottle of wintergreen oil from the dresser drawer. My leg is all stiff. Please massage it for a second, Mom. It hurts so much." "Ah!" Eleanor clicked her tongue in annoyance, throwing me an irritated glance. Hurriedly, she turned, walked towards the wardrobe in the corner of the room, bent down, and rummaged through a drawer to find the bottle of oil. It only took 5 seconds. That brief moment when her back was turned was the moment that decided all our fates. Like lightning, without a trace of the pain or slowness of a cramping pregnant woman, I leaned forward. My hand reached for the wooden tray, and with a movement that was both neat and precise, I poured the entire contents of the elixir from the blue-rimmed bowl, the liquid containing a deadly, high dose of abortion poison, directly into the crystal glass holding Chloe's pale pink collagen drink. The color from the goji berries blended perfectly with the pink hue of the collagen, leaving no trace of a difference. To complete the deception, I quickly grabbed the bottle of warm water from the nightstand, poured a little into my own elixir bowl, and stirred it to mix with the remaining strands. It all happened in the blink of an eye. When Eleanor turned around with the bottle of oil in her hand, I was already lying back down, clutching my calf and whimpering. Meanwhile, the bowl in my hand now contained only about half a portion of clear water and a few white strands. Here's the oil. Big belly, so many problems. Quickly drink the rest of your elixir before it gets cold and tastes bad. Yes, Mom. I lifted the bowl of warm water. Under Eleanor's strict supervision, I closed my eyes and drank it all in one gulp, down to the last drop. Placing the empty bowl on the tray, I looked up at her, giving the softest, most resigned smile I could muster. It was delicious, Mom. I finished it all. I'm sure I'll sleep very soundly tonight. Good that you finished it. Tonight, I will make sure you sleep very, very soundly. You won't feel any more pain. Eleanor collected the tray and turned to leave the room. Her shadow disappeared behind the door, carrying with it the crystal glass filled with deadly poison, straight to the room of her beloved daughter. The door clicked shut. I sat up in bed. No more moaning, no more pain. The darkness of the room enveloped me. I stared straight into the empty space. My hand unconsciously crumpled the bedsheet. A cruel decision had been made. I had no regrets. If they wanted to use my child's blood as a red carpet to their future, then I would use the same poison to cleanse this filthy family. Tonight, a life would pay for the sins of these greedy people, and that life would not be my child's. That night, after watching Eleanor carry the glass of deadly collagen-mixed poison to Chloe's room, I lay in bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the blank ceiling. My heart beat slowly but heavily. There was no fear, no regret. A pregnant mother's instinct had stripped me of my final weakness. I knew from the second I swapped the contents of the bowl into Chloe's glass, the wheel of karma had officially begun to turn, and it would crush those who planned to kill my baby. The next morning, I woke up very early. I went to the bathroom, carefully washed my face with cold water, and stared at myself in the mirror to compose my expression. I had to perfectly act the part of a pregnant woman who was exhausted, suffering from morning sickness, and slowly losing her strength from the drug Eleanor believed I had consumed. I chose a dark-colored maternity dress, deliberately applied a pale foundation to my face, and used a nude lipstick to make my lips look dry and lifeless. Once ready, I slowly descended the stairs, leaning lightly on the banister, my steps heavy, occasionally clutching my lower back and wincing. The moment I entered the dining room, Eleanor's gaze shot towards me like a dagger. She was busy peeling fruit at the kitchen counter, but her full attention was on my belly and my expression. Seeing my lethargic and pale appearance, the corners of her lips couldn't hide a satisfied smile. She quickly put down her knife, walked over, and pulled out a chair for me with a fake solicitude that made me sick. She asked if I had slept well, how my stomach was. I deliberately let out a long, sad sigh, wincing as I said that my stomach had felt tight all night. There was a very heavy feeling in my lower abdomen. I had tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Of course, Eleanor's eyes lit up. In her narrow, evil mind, the symptoms I was faking were a sign that the high-dose abortion poison was beginning to work. She was convinced that in another day or two, the fetus in my womb would be dead, and I would be crawling out of this house in agony. At the same time, Chloe came down from upstairs. In stark contrast to my pale appearance, she was lavishly dressed, wearing a tight bodycon dress, heavy makeup, and a cloying perfume. Chloe pulled out a chair, plopped down, grabbed a slice of apple, and bit into it crisply. She had no idea that last night, she was the one who had swallowed the abortion poison her mother had painstakingly procured to harm me. Looking at Chloe's rosy, arrogant face, I felt an overwhelming sense of irony. Collagen might make your skin beautiful, but it couldn't save a uterus that was slowly being destroyed from within. Chloe excitedly told Eleanor about her plans to go to the spa that afternoon, then go on a designer shopping spree with her credit card in preparation for her weekend date with the married seafood tycoon. She dreamed of luxury apartments, extravagant European vacations after marrying into the conglomerate family. Listening to her daughter, Eleanor beamed, nodding continuously and promising to buy her some pure gold as an investment. The mother and daughter were lost in their fantasies of wealth, trampling on human morality, unaware that the Grim Reaper's scythe was already at their necks. For the next 2 days, my perfect charade continued. I took leave from work, locking myself in my room, using the excuse of fatigue and stomach cramps that made it impossible to walk. Eleanor was, of course, overjoyed. She didn't bother to hide her satisfaction, often pacing in front of my room, pressing her ear to the door to listen for any signs of bleeding. She even spoke loudly to Chloe in the hallway. "This house is going to have a big celebration soon. Just get rid of all that bad luck junk from now." I sat inside my locked room, munching on an apple with a cold smile. I caressed my round belly, feeling the strong heartbeat of my beloved child. They were waiting for me to collapse, but they didn't know that the real-time bomb was ticking in Chloe's stomach. Medical abortion drugs don't work instantly, especially since the dose was mixed with another liquid. It takes time to be absorbed into the uterine wall, shed the mucosal lining, and destroy the embryo. I counted every hour, every minute. I knew this charade would soon come to an end. On the second day after I switched the drug, the first signs of destruction began to appear on Chloe. That afternoon, I stood in a hidden corner near the stairs, holding a glass of warm water, silently observing the living room. Chloe had just returned from a nail salon. Tossing her luxury bag onto the sofa, she clutched her lower abdomen. Her expression showed a hint of discomfort. The face that was usually rosy and arrogant now looked somewhat pale. She frowned and called for her mother in the kitchen. Eleanor, who was cooking, rushed out. Chloe complained that her stomach had been feeling a dull ache since morning. There was a tightness in her lower back, like period cramps, but much more stabbing and agonizing. Moreover, she felt cold. Her hands and feet were trembling, and she had no energy left to go out again. If she were a normal mother, Eleanor would have panicked and taken her daughter to the doctor. But greed and foolishness had blinded her. Hearing Chloe's complaints, she wasn't worried, but instead laughed with delight, slapping her thigh. She confidently asserted that these were very normal symptoms of morning sickness in the early weeks of pregnancy. She even boldly predicted that such strong cramps must be a sign of a baby boy, an heir for the tycoon. Hearing her mother's words, Chloe immediately breathed a sigh of relief, even laughing in satisfaction. She completely believed her mother, stroking her flat stomach arrogantly. She began to imagine how happy the tycoon would be to learn he was having a son and would surely throw a pile of money at them to buy a luxury villa. The two women resumed their daydreaming, their cackles echoing in the living room. Standing in the shadows, I watched the scene and shuddered at their stupidity. The irony of fate was now more real than ever. The old woman who had gone to great lengths to find a deadly poison to kill her own grandchild was now standing there, laughing and reassuring her own daughter, boasting about the pain from the poison that was tearing apart her daughter's womb. She had no idea that what she was proudly calling morning sickness was actually the process of the uterine lining shedding, the most brutal murder of the seed of life her daughter was using for blackmail. On the night of the second day, Chloe's condition worsened. At dinner, she couldn't eat anything, just picked at a few vegetables, then clutched her stomach, wincing. The contractions started coming more frequently. Chloe was sweating coldly, her made-up face now ashen like paper. She had to hug her stomach tightly, hunched over the dining table. Only then did Eleanor show a hint of concern. She quickly brewed some hot ginger water and forced Chloe to drink it. Her mouth still reassured her that the pain was because the fetus was implanting itself in the uterine wall. She told Chloe to go to bed and rest, not to walk around too much to avoid a miscarriage. Julian, my indifferent husband, glanced briefly at his sister, mumbled a cold "get some rest," and went back to his phone, messaging someone. I sat across from them, slowly eating my rice. My eyes coldly swept over Chloe's pained face. "It hurts, doesn't it? Your conscience never hurt you. But there's no escaping physical punishment. They planned for me to bear this pain. They wanted me to lie in a pool of blood, screaming in despair, and now it was all coming back to haunt the criminals themselves." I didn't sleep that night. Lying in bed, I strained my ears, listening to every sound from Chloe's room across the hall. Sometimes I heard Eleanor's hurried footsteps. Then, Chloe's muffled groans from behind the door. The herbal poison combined with the chemical agent was not something to be trifled with. It was working exactly as the seller had promised Eleanor. The only thing that had changed was the target. I knew that tomorrow morning, the real bloody storm would begin. My game of feigned patience was over. Now it was time for me to enjoy the tragedy of this family. Everything exploded at exactly 8 a.m. on the third day. The quiet villa was suddenly torn apart by a horrifying, shrill scream from the first-floor living room. The scream carried an overwhelming terror, as sharp as a knife scratching glass. In my room, combing my hair, I stopped. The corners of my lips curved into a cold smirk. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. I calmly put down the comb, smoothed my maternity dress, and slowly walked out of the room towards the stairs. "Mom, help me! Blood, there's so much blood, Mom! It hurts so much! Help me, oh God. Chloe, dear. Why are you like this? Oh my God, how could this happen? Blood. Where is all this blood coming from? Oh my God, my child. Julian, call an ambulance. Quick, call an ambulance. I stood on the wooden staircase landing, looking straight down into the living room. A chaotic, bloody, and pitiful scene was laid out before my eyes. Chloe was writhing on the clean white marble floor. She was wearing a white silk nightgown, but from the waist down, it was now stained a deep red. A large pool of thick, fresh red blood was spreading on the floor, soaking the expensive hand-woven rug. Chloe clutched her lower abdomen, her body curled up like a shrimp being roasted over a fire. Her face was deathly pale, without a drop of color. Sweat poured down her forehead. Her eyes were wide with horror and despair. Her mouth was constantly open, gasping for air and letting out heart-wrenching moans. Eleanor was on her knees on the floor. Her hands trembled violently as she held her daughter's head. She was completely lost. Her expensive silk blouse was also smeared with sticky blood. She was using her hands to press on Chloe's thighs as a reflex to stop the bleeding. But it was useless. The blood continued to gush out in waves with each violent contraction of her uterus. Dear, hang on. Don't close your eyes, dear. It's not possible. How could she miscarry? The fetus was healthy. Julian, where are you? Have you called the ambulance yet? You bastard. My daughter could die. Oh God. Julian ran out of the bathroom, his face panicked, fumbling with his phone. He saw the pool of blood on the floor and froze, trembling so much his phone fell. I calmly descended the stairs, step by step. The sound of my slippers was steady, relaxed, a stark contrast to the atmosphere of death and panic below. I walked past the pool of blood, folded my arms across my chest, and stood watching the mother and daughter play out their scene of life and death. Oh my Mom, what's wrong with Chloe? Just yesterday you were saying she had morning sickness with a baby boy. How did it come to this? There's blood everywhere, the floor is filthy. You damn wretch. Are you blind? Can't you see your sister is hemorrhaging? You just stand there and talk sarcastically? Get down here and hold her hand, quick. You goddamn jinx. But I'm pregnant, Mom. With this big belly, how can I bend down? Besides, there's so much sticky blood. I'm not used to it. What if it affects your precious grandchild in my belly? Chloe's your daughter. You're her mother. You should take care of it yourself. Mom, I feel like I'm dying. I can't breathe. My stomach feels like it's being stabbed with a knife. Mom, help me! Chloe shrieked, and then slowly passed out. Her eyes glazed over, her body beginning to convulse from the massive blood loss. The high-dose abortion drug was destroying everything inside her. Seeing her daughter faint, Eleanor cried hysterically. She raised her blazing red eyes, full of hatred, to look at me, as if she wanted to pounce and eat me alive, but she couldn't let go of Chloe. Just then, the wail of an ambulance siren blared from outside the villa gate. Julian rushed to open the door. The medical team entered with a stretcher. They too turned pale at the amount of blood on the floor. Doctor, please help my daughter. She's pregnant. Her stomach suddenly started hurting, and blood is pouring out like a river. Please save my grandchild, doctor. The ER doctor quickly administered first aid, his face grim. He ordered the nurses to lift Chloe onto the stretcher, then yelled at Julian. The bleeding is too severe. Blood pressure is dropping drastically. The patient is showing signs of ruptured membranes and massive hemorrhage. She needs to be transferred to the ER at Greenwich General Hospital right now. A few minutes delay and her life can't be saved. Panicked, Julian and Eleanor ran after the stretcher into the ambulance, leaving me standing alone in the middle of the blood-stained living room. The sound of the ambulance siren roared, and then faded into the distance, carrying away the criminals in a race against death. I stood there, staring at the pool of blood on the carpet, without a shred of pity, without a single tear falling. That was the price to be paid for greed and cruelty. I casually turned towards the kitchen and poured myself a glass of warm milk. The real battle wasn't over. The verdict at the hospital would be the most brutal punishment I had prepared for them. Greenwich General Hospital was always noisy and crowded, but the thick air, smelling of disinfectant in the obstetrics and gynecology department, always carried a terrifying chill. 3 hours after the ambulance took Chloe from the house, I leisurely called a cab to the hospital. I didn't need to rush. The drama there was already being played out by the doctors. I was just coming to enjoy the final act of the show. As I walked down the long corridor in front of the operating room, the sight that greeted me was the total devastation of Julian's family. Eleanor was slumped on the cold tiled floor. Her elegant bun was now a mess. Her expensive silk blouse was still covered in dried blood that had turned a sickening dark brown. She held her face in her hands, constantly muttering incomprehensible words. Julian was pacing in front of the operating room door like a caged animal. He ran his hands through his hair, his face ashen with fear. Seeing me appear, Julian was like a drowning man finding a life raft. He ran towards me, intending to grab my hand, but I stepped back coldly, avoiding his disgusting touch. My gaze passed over him, filled with indifference. You came, Alara. Chloe, what's wrong with her? There was so much blood. The doctors are still working on her inside. It's been over 2 hours, and no one has come out. I'm scared, Ela. Julian stammered, his voice trembling. The voice of a coward who had never faced a real storm in his life. I folded my arms across my chest and smirked. I came to see how my dear sister-in-law is doing. The house is a mess with blood everywhere. I had to call someone to clean it up before I could come here. Besides, what are you afraid of? Didn't Mom say she had morning sickness because she was pregnant with a boy? They'll probably give her some medication to strengthen the pregnancy and send her home. My sarcasm was like pouring oil on a fire. Eleanor immediately lifted her head from the floor. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, stared at me with pure hatred. She pushed herself up from the floor, staggering, and pointed a trembling finger at my face. You damn bitch. You came here just to laugh at me, huh? Your sister-in-law is dying in there and you can still open your mouth to curse her? You cold-blooded. You're a demon this family brought in to harm my child. Mom, you're being ridiculous. She got a stomachache on her own, started bleeding on her own. What does it have to do with me? Or maybe you fed her something you shouldn't have. Made her drink some shady concoction with unknown origins. That's why this happened, I replied calmly. Each word was spoken slowly, but sharp as a knife. I deliberately emphasized the phrase, shady concoction, with unknown origins. I saw Eleanor's eyes flicker with shock, but her panic for her daughter's life quickly masked any suspicion. Just as the argument was about to explode, the glass door of the operating room suddenly opened. A doctor in green surgical scrubs, a mask, and a cap came out. His rubber gloves were still stained with fresh blood. His face showed the tension and exhaustion of a critical life-saving operation. Family of the patient named Chloe? The doctor's voice was sharp. His eyes swept over the three of us. Eleanor and Julian immediately rushed towards the doctor like moths to a flame. I'm her mother. Doctor, how is my daughter? How is my grandchild? Can the pregnancy be saved, doctor? A tycoon is waiting for good news from her. You have to save my grandchild, doctor, Eleanor shrieked, clutching the surgeon's sleeve tightly. The doctor frowned. His gaze towards Eleanor was not one of sympathy, but a mixture of annoyance and the sternness of a medical professional facing a case of gross negligence. He shook off Eleanor's hand. His voice was cold and firm, echoing in the quiet corridor. Save the pregnancy? What is wrong with this family? Letting the patient drink an abortion drug with such a horrifying dose. Do you know this is a type of harsh medical drug combined with illegal, toxic chemicals? The patient was brought to the hospital in a state of massive hemorrhage. Her uterine contractions were so severe, her uterus was nearly destroyed. The fetus was already dead inside and expelled on its own before she even arrived at the hospital. The doctor's words were like a lightning bolt striking Eleanor directly. Her whole body tensed, her eyes widened, her mouth hung open, unable to speak. The words abortion drug echoed in her brain. The satisfaction and pride she felt for concocting the poison in my elixir bowl yesterday morning suddenly turned into a violent slap that shattered her consciousness. Julian, next to her, was also gaping and stammering. Doctor, what did you say? Abortion drugs? Chloe. She had no reason to have an abortion. She was going to have a child for that man. Settle your family matters at home. I only care about the patient's life, the doctor cut in curtly. He pulled off his mask, took a long, heavy breath, and then announced a fact 10,000 times more cruel. The patient lost too much blood. The bleeding couldn't be stopped by normal means because the uterine wall was too severely damaged by the chemicals. To save her life, we had no choice but to perform a permanent, total hysterectomy. The patient is past the critical stage and is being moved to the ICU. But from now on, she will never be able to get pregnant and have a child again. The family should prepare themselves and handle the administrative paperwork. A permanent hysterectomy. Never be able to get pregnant again. The cold, cruel verdict from the medical world struck like a giant hammer, completely shattering the dreams of wealth, of marrying into a conglomerate family, held by the mother and daughter. Eleanor stopped crying. Her screams were stuck in her throat. She slowly sank to her knees on the cold tile floor. Her eyes became dull and empty, staring into space. Her lips kept trembling, but no meaningful sound came out. This reality was too cruel, too brutal, for a criminal's brain to process. The poison she had painstakingly sought, which she had proudly concocted to end my life, had somehow been switched. The poison hadn't entered my stomach. Instead, it had been delivered by her own hand with a bright smile to her beloved daughter to drink. It was her hand that had given the cup of poison that killed her own grandchild. It was her hand that had cut off her daughter's line of descent, destroying Chloe's womb forever. It was her hand that had destroyed her daughter's dream of becoming a billionaire's wife, pushing her own daughter into a bottomless abyss. The instant, brutal, karmic retribution had come too quickly. I stood leaning against a wall not far away, my arms folded across my chest, silently witnessing their total collapse. No tears, no pity. In my heart at that moment, there was only absolute silence. The silence of an executioner who had just read the death sentence for the sinners. I slowly caressed my round belly. My dear child, I have protected you. Those who wanted to harm you are now feeling the most painful loss in the world. Julian ran around frantically, handling the hospital admission paperwork, while Eleanor remained dazed on the corridor floor. I didn't approach, nor did I offer any more sarcastic remarks. For her, this pain was more than enough for an opening act. The real truth was still waiting for her when she returned home. I calmly turned and left the hospital, hailing a cab back to the villa. The show at home was the most exciting chapter awaiting me. The large villa was now as quiet as a tomb. In contrast to the bloody panic of the morning, the atmosphere in the late afternoon was thick, suffocating, and eerie. I arrived home first, leisurely brewed a cup of hot chamomile tea, and sat with my legs crossed on the imported leather sofa in the living room. In front of me, the carpet stained with Chloe's blood had been cleaned and discarded by the housekeeper. The marble floor was also mopped clean, shining as if nothing had ever happened. Everything was ready for the next explosion. Past 9 o'clock at night, the sound of a familiar car engine stopped at the villa gate. The sound of a key fumbling in the lock was hurried. The heavy oak door was pushed open forcefully. Eleanor entered the house like a sleepwalker. Her arrogant and haughty demeanor was gone without a trace. Her hair was a mess. Her blood-stained clothes had dried stiff, making her look pathetic and terrifying, like a witch emerging from the darkness. Julian wasn't with her. He was probably still at the hospital, handling paperwork and keeping Chloe company in the ICU. The moment she stepped through the door and saw me sitting leisurely enjoying my tea, Eleanor's eyes immediately flashed with veins of red anger and madness. Without bothering to take off her dirty shoes, she stomped onto the clean floor and ran straight towards me. She didn't say a word. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths. Her eyes darted wildly around the living room. Then, suddenly, like a wild animal sensing danger, she turned and ran towards the kitchen. The loud clatter of pots, pans, and plates being frantically tossed and thrown was heard. I sat in the living room, a thin smirk on my lips. I knew what she was looking for. She was trying to find an answer to the bitter reality the doctor had thrown in her face at the hospital. She was looking for the ceramic bowl with the blue rim, the bowl that had contained the poisoned elixir she believed I had swallowed last night. But she wouldn't find anything there, because I had washed it clean myself, leaving no trace. The clattering in the kitchen stopped. A frightening silence enveloped the house for a few seconds. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps climbing the wooden stairs echoed. She ran to the second floor, towards Chloe's bedroom. I slowly placed my teacup on the table, stood up, and followed her at a leisurely pace. I didn't want to miss a single second of this final act. When I reached the front of Chloe's room, the door was wide open. The scene I saw was Eleanor on her knees next to her daughter's vanity. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She was holding a crystal glass, the same glass she had prepared herself last night, filled with Chloe's collagen drink, and brought to this room. At the bottom of the clear crystal glass, there was a layer of pale red sediment with tiny specks of powder that hadn't fully dissolved. It was clearly visible. A strange, characteristic smell of the abortifacient herbal root wafted faintly. Eleanor's eyes stared intently at the red sediment. Her pupils dilated to their maximum. Her entire body stiffened. Her mouth hung open, her breath coming in ragged gasps as if she were suffocating. She wasn't a fool. Just by seeing that red sediment, combined with the doctor's diagnosis at the hospital, she instantly pieced together the entire sequence of events. The cruel truth, as sharp and cold as an ice pick, pierced her brain. The poison she had ground and mixed into the blue-rimmed bowl with the intention of killing my fetus had, by some miracle, been switched. The drug hadn't entered my stomach. Instead, it had been carried by her own hands with a bright smile and given to her beloved daughter to drink. She was the one who had brought the cup of poison that killed her own grandchild. She was the one who had severed the line of reproduction, permanently destroying Chloe's womb. She was the one who had kicked away the dream of becoming a billionaire and pushed her own daughter into a bottomless abyss. The crystal glass slipped from Eleanor's trembling hand, fell, and shattered on the wooden floor into hundreds of sharp pieces. The loud sound of breaking glass echoed in the silent room, just like the sound of the evil woman's soul and consciousness shattering. Eleanor collapsed to the floor, kneeling among the shards of glass. She clutched her head tightly. She let out a choked roar, not a cry, but the howl of a cornered wild animal, realizing she had torn her own child's throat. No, it's not possible. I marked the bowl with the blue rim. How could this be? Why is it in Chloe's collagen glass? It's not possible, she rambled insanely. Her gaze became wild, and she slammed her hands hard on the floor until they bled. I stood with my arms folded, leaning against the doorframe, coldly witnessing the scene. The truth was fully revealed. The one who sowed the wind had finally reaped the most destructive whirlwind. The physical pain Chloe was suffering in the hospital, the mental agony tearing Eleanor apart right now, were all just karmic punishment for their filthy intentions. I took a deep breath, my chest feeling incredibly light. This psychological war had reached its end. Now it was time for me to play my trump card, to throw the cruelest truth in the enemy's face, to completely end this foolish charade where she thought she was the winner. Eleanor's mad howls slowly subsided, replaced by heavy breathing and the loud grinding of her teeth echoing in the stuffy room. From the floor littered with broken glass, she lifted her head. Her eyes met my shadow, standing casually against the door, arms crossed with a cynical smirk. In an instant, the confusion and despair in her eyes vanished, replaced by a deep hatred, a blazing fire of vengeance that seemed to want to burn everything around her. She was starting to understand. She understood that this switch was not a miracle, nor a coincidence. It was a perfect scenario. A deadly counterattack from the daughter-in-law she had always considered meek and obedient. She pushed herself off the floor, staggering to her feet. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were askew and caked with dried blood, making her look no different from a demon revealing its true form. She lunged at me, her thin hands extending sharp nails as if to claw and strangle me to death. It was you, you whore. You switched the medicine. You killed my grandchild. You made Chloe lose her womb. You're a venomous snake. I have to kill you to avenge my child. She shrieked hysterically. Saliva flew everywhere. Her eyes were red with the veins of hatred. I didn't flinch, let alone take a step back. I stood firm as a rock, staring straight into her crazed, wrinkled face with a gaze as sharp as a razor. When her hand was just inches from my face, I reached out and slapped that filthy hand away with firm disgust. The strength of a 5-month pregnant woman, combined with accumulated rage, was enough to make her stumble back several steps and fall onto the edge of the bed. Casually, I reached into my expensive handbag and slowly pulled out a single sheet of paper, neatly wrapped in a clear plastic folder. It was the biochemical test result from the lab I had visited a few days ago. I swung my hand and threw the cold paper right in her face. It fluttered to the floor, revealing the bold, clear lines of text right before Eleanor's eyes. That's right, I switched the smoothie glasses. Read that paper carefully, my dearest mother-in-law, I snarled. Each word was spoken slowly but as hard as steel. You think I'm a fool? You think I didn't hear you grinding abortion pills at 2 a.m. in the kitchen? Harsh abortion drugs mixed with fetus-expelling roots. You were going to use that to kill the flesh and blood of this family, weren't you? To kick me out onto the street so you could bring in the daughter of the Sterling Vance chairman as your daughter-in-law, right? Eleanor stared at the test result. Her eyes bulged. Her lips trembled, unable to speak. All the evidence was laid out so clearly. There was no way for her to deny or lie anymore. I took a step forward, cornering her against the edge of the bed, completely dominating the weak resistance of a perpetrator whose true colors had just been exposed. Mom, you wanted me to miscarry. You wanted me to bleed in agony. I simply returned the gift you and your daughter so painstakingly prepared. Your own weapon turned against you. How does it feel to personally deliver a bowl of poison that kills your own grandchild? How does it feel to destroy your own daughter's reproductive future? How does it feel, Eleanor? Bitter, painful, and full of vengeance? Just like what you wanted to do to me and my baby? Every sentence I spoke was like a sledgehammer, mercilessly pounding her already collapsed psyche. Eleanor clutched her head, her body swaying back and forth. Her screams had now turned into choked, broken sobs, like the sound of a severely wounded animal writhing in despair. No, I didn't want to. I just wanted to get rid of you. I didn't mean to harm Chloe. Chloe, my child, she rambled. Her hands tore at her own hair until clumps fell out. The late regret mingled with the extreme pain of realizing that her own greed and cruelty had plunged her family into a chasm of tragedy. It made her completely lose her sanity. She began to laugh. A shrill, insane laugh echoed in the silent room. She laughed while crying. Tears streamed down her horrifying face. She pointed at the broken glass on the floor, mumbled Chloe's name, then looked at me with a vacant, dazed expression. Her sanity had officially shattered. This truth was too cruel, exceeding the limits of human tolerance. She had gone mad. I took a few steps back, watching this criminal crawl on the floor, pick up sharp pieces of glass, and scratch her own hands until they bled, while her mouth continued to cackle. There was no pity, no explosive satisfaction. My heart was as calm as a lake in autumn. This was just the beginning of the fall of Julian's family. This game still had one last chess piece to be revealed, and I would be a witness to the atonement of every bastard who dared to push me into a corner. The thick scent of disinfectant in the ICU smelled like bleach, stripping away all the glittering outer layers of humanity, leaving only the most naked and painful truth. I stood in the corridor outside, looking coldly through the transparent glass at the final fate of those who had planned to take my child's life. Chloe lay on the hospital bed, tubes attached everywhere on her body. Her face was as white as paper, her lips dry and cracked. There was no trace of the arrogance of someone who had just been dreaming of entering the world of conglomerates. As the effects of the anesthetic gradually wore off, Chloe slowly opened her eyes. The pain from the contractions in her lower abdomen shot to her brain, making her wince and moan softly. Julian was sitting beside her, his head bowed. Seeing his sister wake up, he quickly stood up and held her hand. In a very weak voice, Chloe asked about her baby, the weapon she was going to use to tie down the tycoon. Julian didn't dare to look his sister in the eye. He bowed his head. His voice was choked as he delivered the cruel fact that the fetus was gone and that Chloe's uterus had also been permanently removed by the doctors to save her life. Chloe's eyes widened, her pupils shrinking. She didn't seem to understand, or deliberately refused to understand what her brother had just said. The hand with the IV needle in it trembled violently, trying to touch her flat, bandaged lower abdomen. Then, a shrill scream that tore through her throat sounded so mournful and desperate that even the passing nurses shuddered. Chloe thrashed wildly, pulling out the IV line until it bled, staining the clean white sheets. She couldn't accept the reality that she had become a broken woman, having lost her natural right to be a mother forever. Just then, Chloe's phone on the nightstand vibrated incessantly. The screen showed the name Mr. Thompson, the tycoon in whom she had placed all her hopes. Julian answered the phone, intending to inform him of his sister's condition. But before he could open his mouth, a barrage of coarse curses thundered from the other end, loud enough to be heard throughout the room. The man roared in anger, saying that his wife knew everything, and that his company was being frozen by his wife's family. He cursed Chloe as a cheap, low-life woman, daring to use some unknown fetus to blackmail him. He declared he was cutting all ties and threatened that if Chloe ever dared to show her face again, he would have thugs finish her off. Click. The phone was hung up like a final knife slash, cutting off the last thin thread of Chloe's hope. Chloe lay motionless. Tears streamed down her face, mixed with absolute despair. At that moment, Eleanor staggered into the room. She had completely lost her mind after discovering the truth at home. Her clothes were disheveled, her hair a mess. She ran to the side of the bed, her hands holding her daughter's face. Her lips kept muttering meaningless apologies. However, Chloe was no longer the obedient daughter. Physical pain, permanent loss, and the shock of being dumped by her lover had turned her into a wild animal. The moment she saw her mother, the person who had directly handed her the glass of poison, all of Chloe's emotions exploded. With the last of her strength, she pushed Eleanor's body hard, sending her sprawling to the floor. Chloe pointed straight at her own mother's face, her eyes blazing with vengeance. She cursed her mother with the most venomous words. "You're a demon. You're the one who destroyed me. Give me back my womb. Give me back my life. I hate you. I will never forgive you in my life." The curse from her most beloved and spoiled daughter was like a hammer blow that shattered the last remnants of Eleanor's already fragile sanity. She clutched her head, her eyes wide and mad, her mouth letting out a strange, wordless shriek. She jumped up, not looking at Julian, not looking at Chloe, and ran straight out of the room, down the hospital corridor at a madwoman's pace. I slowly followed her at a safe distance, coldly witnessing the arrival of instant karma. Eleanor ran out of the hospital gates and darted into the middle of a busy highway. Her mind was in chaos. In her ears, only her daughter's curse echoed. She was completely oblivious to her surroundings. She ran, raising both hands to the sky, cackling in the middle of traffic. The long, deafening blare of a horn sounded from an intersection. A tractor trailer loaded with construction materials was speeding towards her. The driver slammed on the brakes. The sound of tires screeching against the asphalt created a pungent, burning smell. But it was too late. Eleanor, in her madness, kept running forward and threw herself directly under the massive truck that was still skidding forward. A loud, heavy, and dull thud tore through the noisy city air. Eleanor's body was thrown several meters, rolling on the asphalt before coming to a still, motionless heap. Blood poured from her head and body, mixing with the dirty city dust. The screams of pedestrians and the screeching of brakes around her created a chaotic and tragic scene. I stood silently on the sidewalk, under the shade of a large tree, my hands gently stroking my growing belly. My eyes showed not a hint of pity or fear. Not a single tear fell. The person who planned to kill an innocent life had finally paid for their sins with their own blood and life. The circle of karma never misses anyone. It's only a matter of when. Eleanor's funeral was quick and cold. Chloe was still lying in a hospital bed, tormented by physical pain and mental ruin. Julian, the man once dubbed the family's backbone, now showed his true colors as a coward and a pragmatist to the extreme. Instead of keeping watch by his mother's coffin or caring for his disabled sister, he was busy worrying about the CEO position that was slipping from his grasp and fearing that his family scandal would offend Isabella, his golden ticket to high society. I returned to the villa, had the cleaners replace all the curtains, and wiped clean every trace of their filthy family. I sat confidently on the leather sofa in the living room. In front of me was a thick pile of documents I had been secretly collecting for months. When Julian opened the door and entered, he was a mess. His eyes were black like a panda's, but he couldn't hide his frustration. Seeing me sitting calmly sipping tea, he suddenly exploded. He ran over, slammed his hand on the glass table, and berated me, calling me a cold-blooded woman. His mother-in-law had died, his sister-in-law was in the hospital, but I hadn't shed a single tear, not even visiting the hospital. He started playing the victim, saying that his family had treated me well, that I was an ungrateful person who had pushed his family to ruin. I let him vent all his anger. The corners of my lips formed a dismissive smile. After he had shouted himself hoarse, I calmly put down my teacup and looked straight into the traitor's face with deadly cold eyes. Treated me well? Does your family call planning to put abortion pills in my elixir at 2 a.m. treating me well? Julian, stop acting. Your performance is terrible. Julian froze, his face turning deathly pale. He stammered, trying to deny it, claiming he knew nothing about what his mother and sister had done, that he was completely innocent. He started to kneel, grabbing my hand, faking crocodile tears, saying he still loved me, that he was just following his mother's orders in some small matters. But as for the poisoning, he knew nothing. He begged me to forget everything, to rebuild our marriage from scratch. Because now the family was just the two of us, and the child in my womb. I shook his hand off forcefully, nausea rising in my throat. I calmly picked up the iPad from the table, opened a recording file, and pressed play. Julian's voice came through very clearly, mixed with Isabella's flirtatious laughter in a fancy restaurant. The recording clearly captured Julian's promise to Isabella that as soon as his mother took care of my pregnancy, he would immediately divorce me, using the excuse that I was infertile to kick me out without a cent of our marital assets. He even promised to use the money he took from me to buy Isabella an expensive diamond engagement ring. Julian's face went from pale to gray. His lips trembled, unable to form words. But that wasn't all. I continued to throw a pile of bank statements in front of him. Proof of fake transfers he had secretly used to embezzle money from my company, where I had foolishly given him a position as a project manager. I had known everything for a long time, but I chose to remain silent, secretly hiring a private investigator and an auditor to gather all the evidence. I wanted that when I struck, he would have no way to retreat. You think I'm some fool who's easy to deceive? I stood up, looking down at the man kneeling at my feet with the gaze of an executioner. You and your rotten family have sucked my blood, used me, trampled on my feelings, and then wanted to take my child's life. You think I would let you enjoy wealth built on my suffering? Julian was truly panicking now. He knew that with this evidence of corporate embezzlement, I could easily put him in prison until he rotted. He crawled on the floor, hugged my legs tightly, sobbing and prostrating himself, begging for mercy, asking me to remember our marriage and not take him to court. He promised to leave Isabella, to be my servant for life. Seeing the cowardly, pathetic face of the man I once called my husband, I felt pity for my own youth. However, the word compromise no longer existed in my vocabulary since that fateful night. There's no love left between us. All that's left is the law, I stated firmly, one word at a time, pulling my leg from his filthy embrace. Sign these divorce papers. Transfer all assets and company shares back to me. Get out of this house with nothing. In return, I won't hand over your embezzlement file to the police. But if you want to fight, I'll make sure you're in a prison jumpsuit by tomorrow, and your billionaire girlfriend will know the true face of a cheap parasite like you. Julian was completely broken. He knew he had lost completely. With nothing left on the chessboard he thought he controlled. My cruelty and decisiveness had crushed his last weak resistance. Tomorrow the legal battle would begin, and I would strip him of everything, pushing him to the filthiest bottom of society. On the day the court processed our divorce case, the sky over Greenwich was bright and piercingly cold. I entered the mediation room with a calm and cool demeanor, wearing an elegant black suit that concealed my large belly. Walking beside me was the best legal team money could buy. Across from me, Julian sat slumped, broken, and pathetic. Without his expensive designer suit, without the air of a future CEO, he looked like a sewer rat dragged into the sunlight. With the solid evidence of his affair, embezzlement of assets, and indirect proof of his involvement in the plan to harm my unborn child, my lawyer cornered Julian mercilessly. He didn't have a single chance to defend himself. The fear of prison for corporate embezzlement made Julian quickly sign the divorce and asset division agreement I had prepared. The agreement was nothing short of a financial death sentence for him. All shares in the company, the villa where we lived, the luxury cars, and the savings accounts went to me. He left with absolutely nothing, just one suitcase of old clothes. But I had no intention of stopping there. Taking his wealth was just the first step in this war. I wanted to completely destroy the glittering future he dreamed of with Miss Isabella. That same afternoon, after securing the court's divorce decree, I arranged a direct meeting with the chairman of the Sterling Vance Group, Isabella's father. I didn't come to cry or cause a scene like an ordinary woman. I came as a business partner, a woman bearing the truth. In the chairman's luxurious office, I calmly placed a flash drive containing recordings, photos, and documents of Julian's embezzlement on the table. I clearly and firmly exposed Julian's true face. A greedy, professional gold digger willing to kill his own flesh and blood, embezzle company funds, and possessed of utterly depraved morals. I emphasized that a man who would betray his faithful wife and conspire to kill his baby would not hesitate for a second to betray the Sterling Vance Group if a greater profit presented itself. I left the flash drive and turned to leave, completely confident that a seasoned businessman like Mr. Sterling would never accept a son-in-law with no conscience. And sure enough, the results came faster than I expected. Just 2 days later, the joint project between Julian's old company and the Sterling Vance Group was unilaterally terminated. Isabella, after her father exposed her lover's true face, called Julian, cursed him out, and blocked all contact. She threw the cheap gifts Julian had given her into the street, quickly ending their calculated love story. Julian lost everything. He lost his wife, child, wealth, directorship, and his life raft named Isabella. From a man who was always arrogant and proud, he was fired due to the personal and financial scandals that had seriously damaged his company's image. Not a single company would hire someone with such a dark track record. Julian was cast out of the business world, forced to wander, looking for hard, menial labor to survive. However, his tragedy didn't stop there. With Eleanor dead, the burden of caring for his disabled sister now fell entirely on Julian's shoulders. Chloe, after being discharged from the hospital with a broken body and an unstable, crazed mind, couldn't accept reality. She spent her days destroying things in the squalid studio apartment Julian had newly rented, screaming and cursing her brother as a useless man. The bills for medication, medical expenses, and living costs pressed heavily on the shoulders of a man who had never known poverty. I stood on the windy balcony of the villa, sipping a cup of warm ginger tea, smiling faintly as I listened to the detective's report on the miserable fate of the siblings. A sense of satisfaction permeated every cell of my body. Those who had once trampled on my love and sacrifice, those who intended to snuff out the life of this innocent baby, had in the end been stripped of everything by law and truth. They now lived in a hell on earth created by their own greed and cruelty. My war of law and revenge was perfectly complete. I had used my intelligence, the power of money, and the law to destroy the criminals, protecting myself and my baby safely. The dark shadows had receded, making way for a bright, proud, and completely free future that awaited me and my child.